Paul, I've always got quite excited by the fixture list. It's a bit like, for me, a betting show. You sort of know what you think is going to happen, but the SP can always be different. The 2013 fixture list sees 1,464 fixtures. That's up 8. And you were quoted as saying the BHA's responsibility is to provide a framework of fixtures that enables British racing to fulfil its commercial potential. Except at the Leaders in Racing meeting the other day, you were quoted as saying that in the future, and we're talking about 10 years' time, and I know this is a personal point of view, not being discussed at the BHA at all, but a personal point of view is that there'll be fewer race courses and, quote, significantly smaller fixture list. How is it that we need more fixtures in 2013, but you think we'll have less in 10 years' time?
Well, I think, actually, just to clarify my comments at Leaders in Racing, I have an expectation that the fixture list will be smaller, mainly because I actually just think that you will see a consolidation, a natural consolidation in the industry over that 10-year period. And, you know, part of that will be the fact that, you know, it takes space, time, energy, effort, resources to keep horses, breed horses, own horses. And I think that you'll actually just see a natural consolidation in the industry. And you're seeing that in other parts of the world. So I think my expectations of the fixture list being the same size as it is today, they're different in 10 years' time. I do think that we'll have a smaller fixture list. I'm not necessarily advocating for that to be the case, right. But I have an expectation that it will be smaller in 10 years' time.
Well, the big question then is that better or worse for racing?
Well, I think the important thing there is whether it can still be as profitable for racing. So it may well be that on a smaller fixture list, the gross revenues for the industry are naturally a bit smaller than they are at, say, a larger fixture list. But the question for racing is, can it structure itself and model itself in a way that actually the industry, the net income to the industry, so will the industry be as profitable? I think there are certain things that we do that we would need to look at over the 3 to 5 year timetable, looking out 10 years to determine whether that's the case. You know, part of it is the allocation of our costs across nearly 1,500 fixtures. You know, what sort of costs could be taken out of the industry to run a smaller fixture list. So, you know, we're advocating a fixture list that's consumer driven. The consumer driven fixture list means that we need to fill all of what are called the criteria slots from the levy board, and at 1464 we basically fill all of the criteria slots. The criteria slots are basically where bookmakers are saying it would be really useful from the betting industry's perspective to have a fixture in these slots across the course of the week. So part of our challenge as an industry is to fill that so as we can maximise our revenues. That's always going to be our goal, but I just have a personal view, and it's very much a personal one, that the industry is likely to consolidate over the next 10 years.
Can I just chuck a few questions at you that I often get asked as I wander the racecourses, Paul?
Sure.
Do you really believe that more fixtures means more levy?
Well, it undoubtedly does on the data that we have and that's provided by the bookmakers, but that's at the gross, you've got to understand that that's at the gross revenue line. And really, the next piece of work that the industry needs to better understand is the actual industry profitability. And you spoke before about all the different groups that are involved in racing and all the factions and the structure of the industry. Part of the profitability from the industry has to be looking at the industry structure. But there's no question that the more fixtures you run, particularly if they're into the criteria slots where there are gaps from a bookmaker's perspective, yeah, undoubtedly the gross line levy, you know, increases.
So the betting shop idea that the more events you've got going off, whether they're real horse racing, virtual racing, the more things you've got going on, the more people will spend.
Well, I think the way that the stats bear out is that if we don't have a fixture in a certain time slot, say we took away our twilight fixtures, if we don't have British racing in that twilight slot, then people that are in betting shops or wanting to have a bet online will bet on something else.
And you only get levy from the British fixtures?
At the moment, we only get levy on British racing. So again,
not Irish racing?
Part of the challenge for us is to work with bookmakers to see whether there's an opportunity to share in other revenues that are perhaps driven by British racing. But it's absolutely right to say that if we move out of certain slots, like the twilights, then people will bet on other things. The challenge of running a really big fixture list like we do, and it's a big fixture list, is to actually have a level of product differentiation that tells, you know, the consumer what is a really good meeting and what is a meeting that's just simply put on from a betting perspective. And that's a real challenge for us in running nearly 1,500 fixtures.
Product differentiation is your thing. I can only just say it, Paul, but it's your two key words. But you and I both know that's really just code for a tiered system. So when will that happen? When will we differentiate from the good stuff and the bad stuff in a tiered way?
Well, we're working on it at the moment, to be honest. I mean, we've commenced work on actually what product differentiation means. We have some already. British Champions Series is a part of product differentiation. The challenge for us in selling that is actually that you will always get those that perhaps feel excluded, or that their product is not part of the high quality product, being the loudest to complain. And I think as a sport, we
don't want to scare people away from the lower
we
end.
don't, absolutely, because it's there for a reason.
Yeah.
But it may well be there for a reason to fill a betting slot. It may well slot into a twilight fixture. It's not going to have the same status, obviously, as a day at Ascot on a Saturday. Our challenge is to actually, I think, be really aspirational about what we want to do and focus on product differentiation that distinguishes the higher end fixtures, and doesn't necessarily say to people this is a poor fixture, but actually what it says is these are our better fixtures, and they're better fixtures for these reasons, and the prize money levels are going to be of a certain level at these fixtures, and we're going to fund them in a certain way.
So do you think this will come in, and obviously it's not coming in next year, 2014? Do you think we'll have a tiered system?
Well, I think we'll be moving closer towards a tiered system. I mean, would I be hopeful that we'd have all of that in place in 2014? Look, I'd be hopeful. My expectations would be that you'll see greater product differentiation in 2014 than you'll see in 2013.
One of the problems with changing the fixture list, Paul, though, surely comes into the fact that everyone keeps saying that British racing is the best in the world. And when you say that to them, it's not because you can run a maiden for £2,000, because if you run a maiden in South Africa, you'll get a much better return than you will in Britain. It's because of history, and it's because of variety. That's why people say British racing is the best in the world. So if we're potentially, in your view, going to be having fewer racecourses and less fixtures in 2023, say, that means less variety and less history. It means tracks like Hereford and Folkestone, who are disappearing, will no longer be part of the British racing fabric.
Yeah, again, it's a good question, and I'll restate the fact that it's my personal view that the industry is likely to consolidate over a period of time. How far that consolidates, to be honest, is finger in the wind stuff, really. I think the challenge for small race courses, and you mentioned Hereford and Folkestone, the challenge for all race courses, but particularly some of the smaller courses, is actually being relevant to their community and ensuring that they have community support. And the local community support will actually be what drives their sustainability. And I think that while we have viable race courses, profitable race courses, and we can maintain our horse population somewhere around where it is currently, then there's a place for everyone. But I think that what's important is that everyone also knowing their place. So I would say there's a place for everyone, but everyone needs to understand what their place is. And that too links into the product differentiation within the fixture list. One thing that we're really keen to do with the fixture list is create more competition in the fixture list. Because I think competition will drive much better outcomes for horsemen, because it'll potentially drive up prize money, and it'll also mean that certain racecourses that at the moment perhaps don't get access to certain slots might be able to put up their hand and say, you know what, we can create a really big day here, we're prepared to pay up for it from a prize money perspective, but to do that we want to get access to this slot. Brian Kavanagh from Horse Racing Ireland used a great phrase where he said British racing is the best in the world at talking itself down. And I thought that was quite amusing, and I think he makes a point that he was saying that actually he looks across from Ireland and looks at all of the wonderful things that are happening in the sport here, and is often quite envious. And I think that, from my perspective, I'm generally a glass half full, and I tend to be, quite upbeat. There is a lot of people in the sport who I'm surprised at how downbeat about the sport they are. The quality and variety that exists here genuinely is unmatched anywhere in the world.
Kipco Champions Day clashed with Cheltenham. I'm often asked, Paul, why, when we have the big race days, we have lots of other fixtures going off. I mean, how can Cheltenham compete with Kipco Champions Days? All you hear is Frankel every minute of the day. The Grand National, lots of other meetings going off. Derby Day, lots of other meetings going off. The obvious answer to that, of course, is that you're hoping that people who go and concentrate on the big meetings will bet somewhere else in the day. But couldn't we just concentrate You don't run the League Cup final the same day as the FA Cup final. Why do we have to have so many other small fixtures going on when we're trying to concentrate on the big stuff?
Well, I mean, football's an interesting comparison, but I'm not sure how relevant it is, because if you're at a football match, you're focused on that match for 90 minutes. If you're at a race meeting, it's quite easy between races, and if the scheduling's right, to actually be able to watch more races than there are that might take place.
Don't we want to pinpoint everyone to what's really good?
Well,
we have 4 or 5 really good things.
Well, we do, but I think if you look at Aintree, and I'll use the Grand National because I think it's a really relevant example for me from a Melbourne Cup perspective, for example. Melbourne Cup Day, there are more race meetings held in Australia on Melbourne Cup Day than any other day of the year. And the reason for that is because everyone around the country wants to be able to experience Melbourne Cup Day. And not everyone can get to Melbourne Cup Day. So on Derby Day, for example, I think we run 7 fixtures on Derby Day. The issue there is, does that actually give more people the opportunity to experience racing on Derby Day and experience the Derby even if they're not at Epsom? Or should we actually run less fixtures and hope or try and force people to focus solely on Epsom? Fact is, Epsom on Derby Day, you can't get too many more people in than they get in. So would we actually be shutting out a group of people who are interested in racing, interested in going racing on Derby Day, but they don't happen to be at Epsom? Look, I would say personally, based on my Australian experience around Melbourne Cup Day and others, that there's actually a huge benefit for the sport. But I think, Matt, what's important is in the way that we present the product, and particularly say in the newspapers, on a day like Derby Day, would we be better off having less race cards and more editorial about the Derby and focusing on the Derby than actually having more race cards? Yeah, probably. And I think that if we knew in racing that we could actually focus our major meetings, the race cards and editorial within the newsprint, then we would probably move down that path. And I think that's, the issue for us is how do we focus the attention on Epsom, not necessarily just cut meetings out and hope people will focus on it.